And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everyone, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to take a look at a game that I did as a review, when it first came out in 2010 as a written review. But since I've gotten into video reviews, I haven't covered it, and they recently came out with a new edition. That game is Haggis, which is a climbing game for 2 or 3 players from indie boards and cards. Now, climbing games aren't real common. If you've played Tichu, you're going to be familiar with the concept, but the idea here is to score points by taking tricks and or be the first person to get rid of all of your cards and score points in that manner. So real quick, why don't we take a look at what you get inside of this small little box. We'll see how the game plays, and then at the end we'll come back here and I'll give you my opinions of it. Here you can see the components for Haggis dealt out for a 3-player game, thus the 3 14-card hands here. This deck consists of 5 suits, each of which has 2 through 10 in it. They have these nice colors and Celtic knots to denote the suits. Now, this game can also play 2 players. If we were doing that, we'd remove 1 full suit from this deck of cards before we shuffled and dealt it, and then we'd deal out 14 cards to each player. The remaining cards go into a central pile here called the Haggis. So there are 3 cards in this pile in a 3-player game. There would be a few more in a 2-player game. And these cards, actually, the way I dealt it out, are all point value cards. The 3s, 5s, 7s, and 9s in this game are going to be worth points. So we see that we have a point here printed on each of these cards. These cards will go to the first player to go out in a round. Now, Haggis is a game that I would call a climbing game. Now, other people are going to look at it kind of like a trick taker, where you're trying to win tricks in order to maintain the lead, but in this game, going out first is a big objective, because the player who goes out first will get points for the cards remaining in the hand of the player who goes out last. They'll also be able to make a bet that they're going to go out first, either 15 or 30 points, and if they do so, they'll get those points. And then, of course, they're also going to get the points for the cards that they've taken, and the ones in the center that they get to add to their cards that they've taken. So, going out first is a big advantage, but you can earn points simply by taking cards, which are printed right on those cards, 3s, 5s, 7s, 9s, and then the 3 wild cards that each player will start the game with. That is a Jack, a Queen, and a King. These can be used either as their own face value, Jack, Queen, or King, or they can be used to replace any other card in any type of set that you'd like to play. Now, of course, each player is going to have their hand secret from the other players, and the way this game is going to work is that whoever's to the left of the dealer will start by leading some type of combination from their hand. It could be a single card, which would then have to be followed by each player with a single card, or they could choose to pass. When 2 players pass consecutively, that's going to end the trick, and whoever played the last card or set of cards is going to go ahead and take that trick and lead the next. Now, instead of single cards, you can play many other different types of combinations. You could play pairs or 3-of-a-kinds, 4-of-a-kinds, all the way up to 6-of-a-kinds. You could play runs in the same suit. For example, 2, 3, 4. It has to be at least a run of 3, but you could play 2, 3, 4, and that would be a run of 3, which would then have to be beaten by a higher run of 3 in, of course, the same suit from that player's hand. You could play consecutive pairs, so a pair of 7s and a pair of 8s. That is also a viable play, or even 4-of-a-kind 7s and 4-of-a-kind 8s to get rid of more cards from your hand, and of course make it harder for everyone else to follow. Because you want to go out first in order to get bonus points and cards from other players' hands that will score you points as well, in addition to the Haggis from the center of the table. So, you're going to be playing these combinations trying to go out first, but there are special combinations you can play that will let you play out of turn order and not have to follow the typical suit or the typical set that's being played to the table. So if someone plays 4-of-a-kind, you don't have a way to beat it naturally from your hand, you can play what's called a bomb. And bombs are special combinations that can be played out of turn and not following format. The bombs are going to be always using cards that give you points at the end of the round. So 3s, 5s, 7s, 9s, Jacks, Queens, and Kings. The lowest bomb is a 3, 5, 7, 9 combination of any suit. You can play that out of turn order, and it will beat anything currently on the table except for a higher bomb. The next highest bomb is the Jack and Queen combination. The Jack and Queen played together will beat anything that's not higher than the Jack and Queen. The next highest combination is the Jack and King played together, and then the Queen and King. Finally, you have the Jack, Queen, and King using these wild cards, and then there's one super bomb, basically, which is the 3, 5, 7, and 9 of the same suit. If you happen to have that in your hand, it's a great combination, and you can play it to beat anything else out on the table. Now, there's one caveat there that if you play this bomb to beat something, you have to give that trick, including the cards that you used in the bomb, away to one of your opponents, and they'll score the points for those cards. And since these bombs always use point scorings, you're giving away quite a few points in order to maintain the lead, but maybe you can go out first and score a hefty 30 points by being the first one to void yourself of all of your cards. A round of Haggis will end when all of the players except for one have gotten rid of all of their cards. So one player may be the first to go out. The remaining two players in this case would continue to play until one of them voids themselves of their cards from their hand. At that point, the person who went out first is going to count the number of cards in the last player to go out's hand, the remaining cards, including their wild cards. And they're going to score 5 points for each card remaining. So if they have 5 cards left, that player is going to score 25 points. In addition, each player is going to count up the number of cards they have remaining in their tricks that they've taken that have points on them. So you'll see the 3, 5, 7, and 9 are worth 1 apiece. The jacks are worth 2, the queens 3, and the kings 5. So taking these wild cards and taking the 3s, 5s, 7s, and 9s will be important. Finally, what I didn't mention is that at the beginning of the round, each player may bet that they're going to go out first. You can either bet the 15 or the 30, and I did mention that you could bet, but I didn't tell you how. Or you can choose to bet 0. Now, this is a bet that has to be made before you've played your first card, which means that you could pass for several rounds not playing any cards until you see what you need to see hit the table, and at that point you can make a bet that you'll go out first. If you make your bet, meaning that you bet that you'd go out first and you got it, you will get whatever you bet, 15 or 30 points. If you do not make it, those points are going to go to the player who did go out first. So that player would get an additional point. If they bet that they would go out first and they bet 30 points, they'd get their 30. And if you bet that you'd go out first and you bet 30 points, they get your 30 as well. So they're going to get 60 points. In addition, those points will go to any player who did not make a bet. So you're giving it away to the person who went out first and anybody else who chose not to bet against you, and they're going to get those points. So making this bet is an important thing to do. After you've added all those points together, whoever's currently in the lead point-wise will deal the next hand, and you'll continue on. Now you have to remember that whoever won the trick is going to get these 3 extra cards, so in this round they'd get 3 extra points, but you're going to play until one player either reaches 350 for the longer game, or 250 for the shorter game, and the first player to reach that goal will be the winner. Well, there you have it. That is Haggis from Indie Boards and Cards. Now, I'm a big fan of trick takers and climbing games. Tichu is one of my favorite games. It's in my top 10 games of all time, and Tichu is always going to be my clear choice for a climbing game if I have 4 players. But with that said, I don't always have 4 players, and if I have 2 or 3, Haggis is definitely going to be a backup choice to go to, because you just can't always get 4 players who are willing to play Tichu. It's a lot easier to get 2, and a little bit harder to get 3, but 3 is still okay, and there's not a lot of great games for 3 players out there. Overall, this game is very interesting, and I do prefer it with 3 over 2, so it's still only 1 player difference between that and Tichu, but again, you can't always get that 4. The reason I prefer this game with 3 is that because of the way the cards are spread with 3 players, you have 14 cards with each of 3 players, and those cards are spread out a little bit more, meaning there's a lot more possibility of what's going to come up in terms of being beaten by something. There's a lot more of a variance going on there, and I know I'm not usually a fan of variance, but in this type of game I think spreading those cards a little bit further makes a lot more interesting situations come up. When you only have 2 players, you remove a full suit. So, each player has 14 cards. There's a couple of them off in the Haggis that you can get at the end of the round, but it's just not spread as much, and it's a little bit more predictable, in my opinion. That's not to say it doesn't play great with both 2 and 3, but I just prefer it at the 3-player mark, which is apparently not the popular opinion of the game. Anyhow, this is a great game. You're always trying to figure out how you can best use your wild cards. Do you want to give away points by playing bombs? Is it worth it in order to keep the lead so that you can go out first? Well, that really depends on whether or not you made a bet and you're confident in that you can keep it. There's all types of choices to be made, tons of variants, and a great choice if you don't have 4 for Tichu. So that's Haggis from Indie Boards and Cards.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.